right, great. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to, I believe, our third installment of our 21st Century Cohort 27 office hours. Just to let you know, the last office hours didn't have very many attendees, and it wouldn't let me record the meeting, but there were very few questions asked, so you really didn't miss anything. Um, But I'm so happy to see so many people here today. I know the holiday is now past and you're probably like back into the swing of things and better prepared to think about things like a grant application. So I'm interested to see what everybody's questions are. If you haven't been to one of these before, it's just very casual. I have a few things I want to go over with you at the beginning that are just very recent changes since the last time we met. And then the rest of the time, you just have the opportunity to ask questions. It's easier if you put the questions in the chat, but if you're not able to do that, then you can also just unmute yourself and just ask if the floor is open at the time. And we will go from there. So let me just talk about a few things. I sent out an email earlier today to remind everybody about this meeting, but I do want, in case you didn't get that email, I sent the email. I'm only sending emails to the people who have joined the listserv, first of all. So if you're not on the Cohort 27 listserv, then you may not get update emails. So if you haven't done that yet, then you need to go to our 21st Century website, our Google website, our new one. And on the very front page, I think it's on the left, there is a link for you to join that listserv. So I just don't want to blow up a bunch of people's emails about a grant they're not interested in. So if you're interested in the grant, please join that listserv. So that's the first thing. But I mentioned in that email earlier that we have made some changes to our timeline. So let me go over that first. I should have had all this stuff pulled up and ready to go, but to be honest with you, I lost track of time and didn't realize how late it was in the day yet. It's just been one of those days. So give me 1 second. Thought I had it pulled up, but evidently not. So give me 1 second to pull it up. It has been a day already, but it's Friday. Thank God. RFA. Sorry, y'all. Okay. All right, I'm gonna drag this over and share my screen. I can get all the other things. Let me let these people in. Okay.
Amanda, if you want
Yes.
to add one of us as like co-host, we can let the people
Yes.
in.
Yes. Actually, I should have done that before I share my screen. Let me, because I think, hold on, let's see. Give me 1 second. Hold on, I gotta stop sharing and then do that and then share it again. Sorry. I don't know why it makes everything else go away when I do that. Give me 1 second. Let me find you on this list. Where are you at, Carla? Oh, here you are. Make co-host. All right, Carla, I just made you a co-host. All right. Now
Okay.
let's try that again. Share my screen. Okay. All right, so this, let me try to make this a little bit bigger. We've had a lot of people have been out for the holidays, I guess, and so it's just been really difficult to get the RFA through. And unfortunately, I was hoping I could send the information to the people who do the EGAP system to get that application started, the creation of the application started. But unfortunately, until the RFA makes it to certain people in the department, I can't do that because it's just there's just a lot to it. So anyway, because of that, because of how long it's taking, we did go ahead and decide to push the dates back for when the grant is going to be due, and of course, when the EGAP application is going to open up. I'm still nervous about that, just because we just aren't having a great experience with things being done in EGAP right now with the people that we work with. So fingers crossed that this is the last time and only time we'll have to push these dates back. But I did want you to see this. This has also been uploaded to the website, but there's just a few things I want to point out. So I've added some RFA application office hours. Also realized that I had scheduled some I think I had one scheduled for a holiday coming up. So we just kind of, if you went ahead and put in these dates, you may want to go back and check them, because the dates of our office hours have changed, and then some have been added. Also, the intent to apply form, that has been changed to being due on January 30th. Just to remind everyone, that form is not something that you have to do, but it is very helpful for us if you do it, so that we kind of can guesstimate, for lack of a better word, how many peer reviewers we're going to need. And so that kind of help knowing who is going to apply for the grant and how many applications they're going to submit, really does help us to kind of know how many people we need to find to be a peer reviewer. So we ask that you submit that, but if you don't submit it, you can still apply for the grant. Okay. And then hopefully the EGAP application portal will open by February the 18th. Fingers crossed. I'm hoping it's very similar to last year's application. So there are a couple of changes though. So I'm hoping they can just kind of make a copy of last year's and then make the few changes, but we'll see. If it doesn't open by then we'll have to push dates back again. My goal was for you guys to know that you had the grant if you get it before school ends, so that you could go ahead and try to have some people in place for the summer training. So hopefully we can meet that goal. We're going to do our very best to do that. It was painful to have to push it back, but hopefully we won't have to do that again. So then added some different new application office hours. We'll go over on the day that the EGAP application portal opens. We will have a training that day to kind of walk you through that. It's really going to be really good, especially for those of you who don't work with the EGAP system very often. We can just kind of walk you through what it looks like and how to do it. And then just added some more office hours leading up to when the application is due on March the 20th. Okay. And then after that, once you've turned it in, it's just kind of the rest of these dates are really things that more about what we need to know here at the State Department, involving the peer review. But we're hoping, if everything goes as planned, that we'll be able to notify those who got the grant sometime in May. Notice I don't give an exact date on that, because it all depends again on the routing process. Last year, once we had figured out who qualified for the grant, and once we figured out who was going to get the grant and routed that, it went through really quickly. It only took I think less than a week, if I remember correctly. It did not take long at all, but it all depends on who's here in their office and that sort of thing. So I don't know for sure how long it will take. Hopefully it'll be very quick, and then you'll be notified if you got the grant or did not get the grant. And then shortly after that, we'll start training for those who got the grant. Okay. Anyone have any questions about the timeline or anything related to this part of it? Okay, I don't see anything, so I'm going to move on. The email also mentioned that we updated a few of the forms. The MOU template and the contract template, when it went through the secretarial staff, who's great about checking for typos and grammatical errors, they found several. And so had us fix those. And so we fixed them in the attached documents too, and uploaded those, replaced what was there with the new documents. Now, if you've already downloaded the other ones and have already, started in the process of filling those out, then it's not that big of a deal. They're pretty much the same templates that our current sites have right now. So we already have some out there that have typos and grammatical errors. But if you haven't done that yet, please, it would be better if you use the one that, of course, that doesn't have the typos and grammatical errors. So apologize for that. I got the documents from Brewman. And so I just kind of assumed that they were correct, but the secretaries found some things that need to be fixed. And so we just wanted to update those. Okay, a question just popped up. Says on Form 1, when it asks about transportation, does this apply to field trips, or is this referring to transportation to and from the programs? That is referring to transportation to and from your programs, either during the school year or the summer or both, but it doesn't necessarily apply to field trips. Now, if you qualify for that transportation funding and you are going to provide transportation either during the school year or during the summer, and you have money left over, like, so let's say you qualify, let's say you're a rural, so you qualify for the full 20,000 extra for transportation, but you don't spend that entire 20,000, you don't really need the entire $20,000 for transportation to and from the 21st Century Program, then what's left over you can use for field trips. That's fine. But the intent of the money for you to get it is not for field trips. It's for transportation to and from your programs. All right, great question. Okay, and then the other document that was changed was we changed performance goal 6. Let me see if I can pull that up really quickly, because it's changing the RFA too, and it'll be changed from what I told you guys in the informational meeting. So give me just 1 second to find that. Sorry, I apologize. I didn't have these ready to go. Okay. All right, so this is Form 9. This form is very important. Pretty much everything that you put into your narrative that has to do with your programming, as far as your performance goals, your objectives, your strategies and activities, how you're going to evaluate those strategies and activities, and even your budget, how your budget items are related to those objectives and goals. All of that needs to be put into this form. And so if I'm going to scroll down to where you would talk about performance goal 6, which is at the end, and we've just changed it. Hopefully everybody can see this. Let's see if I can get off there. See if I can make this bigger. Oh, okay. I hate it when they have these little weird pop-up things that get in my way. Okay, let's see. There we go. Well, I say, okay, there we go. All right. So I think before it said like families of students regularly participating in the program will be afforded more opportunities for increased parent and family engagement. That's what it said before. And I realized that writing it that way was not a smart goal, right? We don't want families just to participate. That's not the goal. We want them, we don't, I'm sorry, us providing them more opportunities for for family engagement is not the goal. The goal is for them to demonstrate increased engagement in their child's learning and school community, right? Now, to do that, yes, we need to provide more opportunities for them to have family and parent and family engagement, but providing more opportunities for parent and family engagement is not the goal, right? Just having more events is not the goal. That is not going to necessarily make more parents come. It's not going to necessarily make more parents be engaged in their children's learning. So the goal really should have been different. So we revised that to state families of students regularly participating in the program will demonstrate increased engagement in their child's learning and school community. Okay. So that has changed both in the RFA itself and in this form. And so I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. Okay, so a question asks if the intent to apply form is available now. Yes, it is. The link to that is in that timeline that I just showed you guys. So it is intent to apply. So this is actually like a Google form, this link here, and you can click on it to get to the intent to apply form. And you can go ahead and fill it out now. We just ask that you do it by January 30th. You can do it after January 30th if you want to, but it would help us out if it was done by then, so that, because that's when we kind of when we are going to start, hiring people to be peer reviewers. Okay. Yeah, let me know if that doesn't work. Hopefully it works. I tried it. I want to say I tried it a day or two ago and it worked for me. So just let me know, if you guys have any problems accessing that Google form. All right. Would that make, okay, great. Let's see. Here's another question. Would that make year one the baseline year for the parent engagement goal? That make year one the baseline year for the parent engagement goal? Janie, you want to kind of
Yeah, so yes, ma'am. So
expand on that?
I know it's hard to type quick and fast,
That's
trying to
okay.
get it in there. But you were just talking about the goal you revised
Yeah.
with increasing the parent. So
Here, I'll
are
put it
you
back up.
saying would year one be the baseline? So if you're going to increase it, you have to have the baseline to increase, right? Isn't that what you?
That is true. That's a good point. That is a good point. So yeah, I would, well, the way I would look at it is, um,
I guess I'm saying,
so
what is the
you
scale
could,
for that?
well, I'm trying to think of ways you could evaluate that. So yes, you definitely could, probably pull data in future, in the future as to whether you did have more, or that could be part of your evidence is that you do have more parents attending events. So in that case, you would need baseline data for that. If you've already been running a program, then you could use previous years probably data and it would be fine. But if you're just starting out, then yeah, that may not be the best data point to use in year one because you might not have any baseline data to go by. But you could also do a survey, parent surveys or something like that, where you get feedback from them and ask,
If they feel like it.
yeah,
Okay.
if they feel like they've um, had the chance, or you could even interview your staff, interview even potentially teachers to see if your program has affected the parent engagement any. So yeah, there's several ways you could look at providing evidence for that.
Okay. I was just
Yeah, no, it's a
thinking.
great question. Absolutely
Thank
great
you.
question.
Thanks.
Okay, Carla put the intent to apply link in the chat. So if you want to take a minute to go ahead and do that now, you're welcome to do so. Okay, I'm trying to think of what else I wanted to mention to you guys. I want to, look, so one thing I was going to talk to you about is transportation. So since we've already mentioned that, I do want to bring that up. We did also add, to the needs assessment portion of the of your questions, the grant, where we ask you to talk about transportation needs of the families in of your students. So that has been added to the needs assessment portion. We are currently preparing for future federal compliance monitoring on us, and we've been going through checklists of what they look for when they're monitoring, and that was something that we found in their monitoring documents that that needed to be added to our RFA. So we added that in, where we ask you to provide it as part of your needs assessment, the transportation needs of the students or the families. So I did want to mention that when you're doing your needs assessments, which you should be preparing right now, or if I would advise, or very, very quickly start on them, as you're determining the needs of the students and the families and the community members, that needs to be part of it. What are the transportation needs of the students in your community? Okay. The other thing I wanted to mention is about administrative positions. Okay. And this came up because we just have issues with some of our current grantees, and then there has been some questions for people who are thinking about applying, and in regards to that 30% administrative cap. Okay. Please keep in mind that this is a part-time program. It only lasts for 2 or 3 hours a day. And so when you're hiring administrators, it's really not intended to be a full-time position unless it's the program director who's running multiple sites. Then you can justify that. So it's explained in the grant. We've already talked about, best practices of how you should figure out your admin salaries, but just understand, especially with, and I hate to call anybody out, but I'm very blunt, but especially like with our community-based organizations or organizations outside of LEAs who want to be part of this program. We want you to be part of this program, but please understand that you should try to use current staff that you have that already work for your program, and just a portion of their job is running the 21st century program. It's not going to be easy for you to hire somebody as a full-time position to just run the program, again, unless they're running multiple programs. And so just keep that in mind. Our 30% admin cap is way higher than the admin caps of other states. Most other states, RFAs that I've seen, their admin cap is around 10%. So we already kind of give probably more than we should. But just keep that in mind. It's not easy to hire a bunch of full-time people to work with this grant, and we've been trying to kind of nip that in the bud. But we just don't. I hate for somebody to come into this just thinking that, oh, this is our opportunity to hire more staff and things like that for our organization. And then 2 hours a day, a couple of hours a day, they'll be working with 21st century, but then the rest of the time they'll be doing what they do for our organization. That's really, but we can pay them with 21st century funds. That's really not the way it's supposed to work. So I just kind of wanted to bring that up so that people know what they're getting into when they're coming into this. The other thing I wanted to mention, some questions have popped up about MEGA. The expectation in the grant, this is for last year and for this new grant, was for for site coordinators and program directors to come to MEGA for one mandatory day. They're welcome to come for the entire week if you have it in your budget to do so, but the requirement is for that one full day. Now, last year we had a lot of sites that substituted their site coordinator for a principal and brought them in instead. And so we've been asked if that can happen this year. And last year I didn't think about. I was just like, I guess so, that's fine. But that actually created a problem because we still needed And the reasoning most of the time was that they didn't have a site coordinator in place yet. They hadn't hired anybody yet. But it actually and actually caused an issue or a stretch on their budget because they paid for a principal to come to Mega for the entire week, because they were standing in for the site coordinator, but then they still had to pay for that site coordinator to come to an in-person training that we had later in, like when school started. So we ended up having to have a full day training. We did it in Alabaster, and had to have all those new people who had not been able to come to the mega training. They had to come to that, and so they end up having to pay double what they normally would have to. So, that's not going to be allowed this year. If hopefully your program directors will definitely be in place by Mega. You kind of should already have in your head who that's going to be, if possible. And if you don't have a site coordinator hired yet, we hope that you will, but if you don't have a site coordinator hired by the dates of Mega, then you just your program director would come, and then the site coordinator can get the training when we have the makeup day, which is usually like the first month when school starts back. Same thing with, if you've already got if your program director or site coordinator has a major holiday planned, like they're going out of the country or something like that, and they can't come to Mega, that's understandable. They can come to the makeup day at the beginning of the year. But we would prefer for you to come to Mega because we fly in, or hopefully they'll do it again this year. We fly in the people from Easy Reports where they can work on with you one-on-one with getting your programs set up in Easy Reports, which is not easy to do. It's great to have them here in person to show you how to do that. And we can't have them come out twice. So the ones that get the makeup day don't get that. So we highly recommend, if you can come to Mega, but there are alternative things that we can do. If you can't come, you need to let us know so that we do keep record of to make sure that everybody's attended all the mandatory trainings. So, anyway, and if you have any questions about that, we just wanted to let you know. We wanted to make sure we mentioned that, because we did allow it last year, not thinking about how that was going to end up stretching people's budgets. And we just don't need to do that again this year. Okay. All right, so that was all that I had on my list to share with you guys. So what questions do you have about the grant? I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Okay, there's a lot of people in here. Surely somebody has a question. Okay, are we writing the fiscal year starting in July, or will we use October? Great question. Okay, so that's a fun one. So technically, let me give you guys a little bit of background information about this. Some of you already heard this before, but I'm just talking so that everybody new understands this as well. So the federal government's education budget runs on a different timeline than other budgets, right? And our education budget. So the feds actually drop our funds, or at least they're supposed to, on July 1st. But because in the state of Alabama, our education budget, our fiscal year does not start until October 1st, those funds just sit there for 6 months before we give you access to them. Well, that's really not what the federal government prefers for us to do, but for now, that's what we do. So last year, we ended up having to do what we called a pre-award application. We thought that when the RFA was written, we thought there was a very good chance that our fiscal budget was going to be changed to match the federal fiscal budget, and so that's how we wrote it in the grant. But come to find out, they hired someone new, and he wasn't ready to make that change yet. And so that didn't happen. So what we ended up having to do is create a pre-award cost application so that we could give brand new sites access to funds before October 1st. Because it says very clearly in the federal guidance for 21st century that the expectation is for you to start your program on the first day of school. Very clearly. And the past couple of grants before 26 and 27, they didn't get their funds until like the middle of the year. And part of that had to do, I think, with the whole fiscal year issue. And it taken forever to do RFAs and all that kind of stuff. So, so what we've said is if you have a new site and you need to be able to start your program on the first day of school, you need to have access to funds before October 1st. And so if that is the case, there will be a pre-award application that will open up on July the 1st. You will let us know how much money that you will need to run your program for basically from July 1st to September the 30th. So when I say July 1st, I'm not talking about you wouldn't do any summer programming, but you may have some staff that participates in the training. You may have someone who comes to Mega, that sort of thing. And then of course your beginning of year expenses, buying any equipment that you might need to prepare for the beginning of the year. And so you can let us know how much money you need us to it's not sent to you ahead of time. You still will get reimbursed, but it's basically put into another application. And it's very simple. It's not a full application. Basically, it just asks you to fill out some very minor information and then do the budget those funds that you said you would need. So for example, a lot of sites said they needed probably around $30,000 to get them through until September 30th. And so we put that $30,000 into EGAP. They budgeted it, we approved it, and then once we've approved it, you can start drawing down those funds. This past year, it was a bit of a mess because it took forever to get the pre-award application built in EGAP, which I've mentioned already. It's just kind of a source of cringeworthy thing with me right now. But it did work out fine. Everybody was able to get their funds. Now we're just having the issue with if you didn't spend it, getting it put back in. So what happens is if you don't spend all of that pre-award money, it should roll over into your fiscal the next year's fiscal application, which would start on October 1st. And so right now we're having an issue with that rollover part. But hopefully by next year all that will be fixed and you won't have to worry about that. But that's how you get your funds. So when you're writing your grant, then I guess it would really depend on if you're writing it for a brand new site or if you're writing it for a site that currently has a 21st century grant. If you currently have a 21st century grant that's about to end, you already have funds that are supposed to carry you until September 30th from Cohort 17. Okay, so for those of you who are currently have a Cohort 17 grant and you're going to apply again, you wouldn't need a pre-award cost because you are already supposed to be running your program through September 30th. And so really your funding would start October 1st. But I would definitely, if you want to budget it that way, I would definitely mention that in your application that your budget will start October 1st for that reason. You've already got a current grant that will, carry you, because we do have peer reviewers that will be looking at this. And even though I'll tell them that might be the situation for some of you, it doesn't hurt for you to put it in writing in case somebody wasn't paying attention during that part of the training. Okay. But if you're brand new, if this is a brand new site who does not currently have a Cohort 17 grant, then your budget may need to start as early as July 1st, or it may start like right before Mega, to make sure that you've got the funding in there to do that. But really in your budget narrative, you don't really have to put dates. And so it shouldn't be much of an issue. Like if you say that you're putting in $5,000 for professional development to attend Mega, then that's fine. That really could go towards this year's Mega or next year's Mega. And do keep that in mind though. I do want to point that out. If you're new, if you're brand new and you get the grant and you're going to start spending money before October 1st, you still need to take into consideration that that grant amount for your first year has to stretch you from when you start spending money for your program all the way to September 30th of the next year. So you might have to actually pay for 2 megas. So be thinking about that when you're doing your pre-award costs and things like that, or when you're doing your budget. I'm sorry. Now, year 2 through 4, you won't have to worry about that. Your funds will carry you just for the full year, just from October 1st to September 30th. But in that first year, you do have to stretch them a little bit more. If it becomes an issue because you're having to stretch it more, there may be some extra funds we can give to help with that. But we'll tackle that when the time comes if that becomes an issue. Okay, hopefully I answered that. I know I rambled a lot, but I like to try to explain things. Okay, let's see. All right, when filling out the intent to apply, if you are a school system planning to write for 4 grants for 4 sites, do we fill out the intent for each or just one of them? Trying to remember how it asks. We do want to know that you're doing 4 grants. That is a good question. Carla, would you mind going to look at it's been a while since I've looked at it and see if they have to put in a separate one for each site or if they can do it all at once?
So on here, you can do the applicant and organization, and then you can go down, like if you have the LEA, you have to put all that information in, and then you can write the names of the schools that would be served by that 21st century program, and then you can select the proposed number of sites.
Okay. So yeah, you just do it one time and then let us know how many sites you're going to do within that one application.
Right, and you can
I
do
thought
up
we
to
had set
8
it up that way,
sites.
but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, you can do up to 8 sites in this particular one.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Carla. Give me just one second. Okay, if awarded, can the pre-award cost application cover funds to pay for staff to attend the required meeting at Mega and PD for staff in June and July? Yes, absolutely. That's what the intent is. Yep. Okay, if writing for one site but serving 2 schools and providing a bus each day from one school to the other, can you receive the extra transportation funds? The schools are half a mile to a mile apart. No, well, if that's the only transportation you're providing, then I would say no. The intent of that extra transportation funding is to get kids home from the program during the school year or to and from the program during the summer. It's to help boost your attendance. It's not really intended to take you from one site to another. And I'll just tell you guys, we don't prohibit you guys from doing that yet, but it really does create a lot of problems when you try to have 2 schools into one site. Now, if you're busing kids from one site to another and you really do just have one site, that's not as bad. It's when sites try to do 2 separate sites within one grant. That's when it really does stretch your admin funds extremely far and it ends up causing some issues and problems. Also, it causes problems with like you paying your grant reviewers because really you're only allowed to pay them a certain amount, but you're asking them to actually look at 2 different sites. So that's a problem, but that's not what you're asking. You're asking about busing kids from one school to another and really you're just going to have one site. So that's fine. But no, those extra transportation funds are not necessarily for that. Not if that's the only thing you're going to do. Now, can you use it for that if you're also transporting kids home? Absolutely. But if that's the only transportation that's being provided on a regular basis, typically that's not what the intent of those funds was for. Okay. What conferences other than Mega are we allowed to attend? I understand Innovative Summit. The Innovative Summit is no longer allowed. Okay. So I learn new things all the time. Every time I read something that has to do with the grant, with the guidelines or whatever, it seems like I pick up on something new that I had never picked up on before. And one thing I recently picked up on, I probably right, towards the beginning of this year, is that it states in the guidance that attending out-of-state conferences using 21st century funds, it can be used to attend out-of-state conferences, but those out-of-state conferences should be focused on out-of-school time programming. So the Innovation Summit is not focused on out-of-school time programming. And so that's why, I think I did turn someone down for going to that one and asked them to choose another out-of-state conference that is focused on out-of-school time programming. I get that you can still learn best practices from those other conferences, and they're great, and it may be completely beneficial. But since the federal guidance specifically says that it should only be for out-of-state conferences that are for out-of-school time, focus on out-of-school time programming, then that is what we need to stick with. Plus, best practices during the school day may not be the same as best practices out of school time. And so I think that's the intent, and that's the reasoning why is even though you may learn some really great information, that information may not necessarily apply to out of school time programming. And so they would prefer for you to go to things where you're actually learning best practices for out of school time. So the question was, what conferences could you go to? There's Beyond School Hours Conference. There used to be, and I'm hoping they'll start it back. I don't think they're going to do it this year, but there was one that was ran by the federal 21st Century Program. I'm trying to remember what it was called. It was like the National After School Conference or something like that. They had it the very first year that I had this. Thank you, the Summer Symposium. Thank you, Lindsay. They didn't do it last year because that was when the funding was still kind of iffy on 21st Century. And then they've also let us know they're not doing it this year. Hopefully they'll start that one back because that one was really, really good. Beyond School Hours was okay. We went to it last year and we did learn some things. It wasn't amazing, but it was pretty good. Trying to think of what other conferences there are out there. There's one here in Alabama that's coming up, National Summer Learning Conference, but it's I think it's invitation only because it's at a very small venue. Thank you, Annette. There's the NAA, the National After School Association Conference, and then Boost. Those are two that Annette has mentioned that she's attended in the past that I'm assuming were great. So look in the chat because there's people that are putting in great conferences. And then of course, ACEA, thank you, Jennifer, which is our in-state conference that we ask that you come to. That's one that's a mandatory thing that we want you to come to. So that's why I was focusing. Don't get me, Jennifer. That's why I was focusing on out-of-state conferences since that was what was asked about. But yes, you can attend those out-of-state conferences if your budget allows it. Just keep in mind, for those of you who are new or you've done a 21st Century program a long time ago and don't anymore, just keep in mind that if you're an admin going to these conferences, this is part of your administrative cost. So your admin professional development can't go under 2215, which is your regular staff professional development. It has to be tied in with your administrative costs. And so it does limit you a little bit as to what you can go to. So you've got to be able to pay your admin staff and go to these conferences with that 30% cap. So just keep that in mind. Okay. Let's see what else. Yep, some great summer symposium, Boost, NSLA, great conferences that you guys have mentioned. And then Jennifer's put her advertisement for ACA in the chat. ACA is a great conference. I think it's just going to keep getting better and better each year. It was really, really good. Just for budgeting purposes, yeah. So do keep in mind, we did run into this with ACA this past year. You can't register for the conference until after October 1st. So that's kind of a pain, but keep that in mind. In the state of Alabama, even though federal guidance says differently, in the state of Alabama, we say that you can't spend funds for a professional development activity that occurs in the next fiscal year with the current fiscal year money. Again, I don't federal wise, I think that's not necessarily the way it's done in other states, but here in Alabama, that's the rule here. So you wouldn't be able to register. Yes, now you can register. I'm sorry, I forgot the ACA does let you register. You don't have to necessarily pay upon registration. So you could register for the conference. It's just you can't pay for it until after October 1st. Thank you for pointing that out, Jennifer. Some conferences you pay and register at the same time, and I forgot the ACA is more flexible than that. So that's great. And then we would love to see you when it comes to ACA, we would love to see you send as many staff to ACA as possible, because they're really trying to focus that conference on best practices for out of school time programming. And we love our program directors and site coordinators, but sometimes you're not the one that needs to hear those messages. It needs to be your staff that actually works one-on-one with the kids. And so those are the people that we would really love to see come to ACEA. And we can even give you permission to shut your program down that week, the week of the days of the conference, so that your staff can attend. We just ask that you make sure that you let parents know as soon as possible. So if you know that's something you're going to do from the get-go, from the beginning of your program, let them know that on these few days of the year, we will not have after-school programming so that our staff can attend professional development. We got that idea from preschool. They do that with their teachers. And so we kind of stole that idea from them. And we would love to see you guys take advantage of that. And just remember, your staff PD does come out of 2215. And so you've got some more flexibility there. And also keep in mind that your staff is supposed to get 10 hours of PD a year. And so that would take care of that for you, them attending that conference. Okay. Okay, so they just mentioned Jennifer and Lindsay, our current program directors who also are currently running the AZA program, and they're just mentioning that they are trying to go towards more of an automatic payment option. So it may be going in the direction where you register and pay at the same time, but you still have to be careful. That's still going to create a bit of an issue as far as, oh wait, not register, just pay. Okay, not register, just pay. Yeah, I would still suggest that you let people register before October 1st, just so you know how many people you have coming, but we can talk about that later. All right, what other questions may have popped up? I know it's hard to ask questions when you haven't actually seen the RFA yet. Let me remind you that if you haven't gone back and watched the RFA informational meeting, I think it was on November the 21st, I want to say. But it's on the website. It's linked on the website. Make sure you go watch that because I did my very best to go through the entire RFA without giving it to you, right? So like I tried to be very thorough in going through the RFA during that session so that you could go ahead and start working on getting your needs assessment information done and planning what you guys want to do with as part of your program. I don't think if there's any other questions that have been asked or anything, but I don't think so. Use my wait time. Okay, let's see. Okay, here we go. If you partner with your local extension agency, is it acceptable to make them a line item in your budget? Staff and supplies. Think about that one for just a second. So it depends on what you mean by partner with. Okay, that's a good one. Let me think about this. So if you are, is it a situation where you're submitting the application together? Is it a joint application or are they a community partner that you'll be paying like a vendor? Okay, not sure yet. Okay, so if you're joining with them to put in your application as your joint applicants, keep in mind that when you do that, the intent is that it's a partnership in both planning the like writing the RFA, but also implementing the programming. And so potentially, if you've got people that work for the extension office that are going to be spending part of their daily time helping with 21st century, then you could pay a salary for that or part of that person's salary for that. Because they would be part of your program and part of your staff, right? Supplies wise, you would treat it as though you're buying supplies just for your program. Now, if you want to hire, so what's confusing me about that is most things I know about in regards to local extension agencies is typically you don't buy things from them, but I may be wrong about that. I just know every time I used to work for, I used to be a science teacher and then I worked for AMSTI and everything that we did with the extension office was free. So, I'm not sure exactly what you would be buying with the extensions office, but let's say you did have a community partner that is providing some services for free, but some things they would need you to pay for, whether it's the extension office or something else, then you would treat that like they're a vendor. If they're gonna, yeah, you would treat that like they were a vendor. So you would need a contract with them where you're explaining, what it is that you're paying for and why you're paying for it and being specific about that. So even though you're a partner because maybe they are providing some of the services for free that they typically wouldn't provide. But if they want to do that, but maybe they can't pay, they want to ask you to pay for the equipment that's involved or something like that, and you're going to get it through them, then you could pay them as a vendor. But you would just have to figure out how best to work that out. And it may be it may be something that we would need to kind of help you like talk through one-on-one to figure out how best that should look. But yeah, that's possibly okay. So yes, that's what we're talking about doing. They would help with the writing of the grant implementation, and then we would pay part of the staff to work the program. Yeah. So if that is truly what you're going to do, and you're truly partners in in both writing the grant and implementing the program. And some of their staff is going to work as 21st century staff, either in admin position or as teaching staff or something like that, then you could definitely pay part of that staff's salary. Absolutely. Yes, that would be fine. But again, because they're an organization that's outside of your organization, you would still have to have a contract for that, unless, trying to think of how best this would work, unless you're going to hire them as like LEA. If you're from an LEA, yeah, you are. Unless you're going to hire that person as LEA staff, you wouldn't have to do a contract. But if you're going to hire them, if you're going to pay them as a employee of another organization, you would need to have a contract in place. Great question. That one made me think. So until another question pops up, MOUs and contracts have just been kind of like a hotbed topic for the past year or two. We've really tried to focus on making sure that the MOU and contract template are correct and have all of the required federal provisions that had never been really required in programs in the past. But we worked with Bruman to help us create those templates. We didn't even realize, when I first came on, I had no idea that there was a difference in between. I mean, I really thought of an MOU and a contract as kind of sort of the same thing. We always just asked for people to do an MOU, but then upon reaching out to Bruman to get them to help kind of write a good template, they made us realize that we weren't doing it the right way. And that when there's an exchange of funds between you and an organization outside of your organization, it should be a contract that is written. And then there's specific things that have to be in that contract, specific details that have to be in there that we didn't necessarily require in the past, as well as specific provisions. So there's like a bunch of legal mumbo jumbo that is required of all federal programs that has to be included in that contract. So we've really tried to focus on making sure those are done correctly now. And then an MOU is used whenever you have, if you are paying for services within your organization. So let's say you're an LEA 21st century program, LEA ran 21st century program, but you're going to contract with your LEA's transportation department to do that bus, to take those kids home each day. You need to have, you can do an MOU, because you're contracting. I keep saying it's your contracting, but I can't say you're MOUing, but you're having a partnership within your organization. You're exchanging funds within your organization. And so that's when you would do an MOU. And then you also would use an MOU for an organization outside of yours when you have a partnership where there's non-exchange of funds, but so like, for example, that's not a good example because she said they were going to exchange funds, but let's say that you have a joint partnership with the extension office and there's not going to be an exchange of funds, but you are submitting the application together, and you do have certain things that they're going to be responsible for and certain things that you're going to be responsible for. It's advised that you have to have an MOU in place that details who's responsible for what, and make sure that everybody understands what the program goals are and that sort of thing. That's all in there as well. So that's when you would do an MOU for that case as well. But we tried to be specific about that in the RFA, but there's also several videos on the YouTube channel where we've talked about it. If you ever have time to just go back and watch videos about 21st century, you might be able to find some information there as well. I was hoping some other questions would pop up while I was rambling. Okay, well, it's 2:00. So our next RFA office hours is scheduled for January the 22nd from 3:30 to 4:30. The same link. You don't have to wait for an office hours to ask a question. You're welcome to submit a question about the RFA to the just general 21st century email address. I will say we're not great about checking it all the time. I'm a little nervous that there might be some questions in there that I need to go and tackle. Things have been crazy busy. But I will go do that very soon. But you're welcome, or if you have our contact information, you're welcome to reach out to me or one of our staff, and we'll try to help answer your questions. We're here for you. That's why we schedule all these office hours. We want you to be successful and write a good application. So we will try to help support you in any way we can to help you do that. All right, well, I don't see any other questions popping up, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. This will be posted on the YouTube channel either today or possibly Monday if I don't get to it today, but you can refer to it then. And I hope you all have a fantastic weekend, and we will see you guys hopefully on the 22nd. All right.